Thank you for joining us for almost the last session. I guess there is a session after this which says wrap up and reception. I'm Eric Rim. I'm a faculty member at the Harvard School of Public Health in the Department of Nutrition and in the Department of Epidemiology. So you're probably wondering why I'm up here for a waste conference. For a food waste conference. And just to give you a little background, we've done a fair number, within our department, we've done a fair number of studies within school lunch programs, in starting first piloting a program in Boston schools and then spreading out to many other school systems across Massachusetts. We partnered with Project Bread, the Walk for Hunger organization in Boston, as well as with Arbella Foundation, who helped fund some of this. And we had done thousands, actually tens of thousands of plate waste studies in several communities around Massachusetts to see what kids were eating. And I think that's how I ended up on this panel, because there are a lot of people here who are much closer to the ground than I am. We had done several interesting studies. One is having a chef in the school, not a celebrity chef, but someone who actually was trained as a chef and could teach the kitchen staff how to use a knife, so you could cut the carrot and not waste as much of the carrot, and just do some basic skills for teaching cooking to staff, as well as to engaging the kids in making choices about food. We never told the kids what they were going to eat. We kind of said, here's two different things, which one do you like better, and sort of had to engage the kids in the process so that they knew that they had contributed to what the menus were going to be. And lo and behold, we found that if kids were engaged in the food, and even though the chef wasn't paying more for the food itself, we got kids to eat more fruits and vegetables. And in the process of doing this, while we had this large study going on to study chefs in schools, it was right when the 2014 food guidelines were passed for National School Lunch Program, and there was a sudden cry saying, oh, kids are throwing away all their fruits and vegetables. How can we be forcing them to take a fruit or a vegetable? We have the most expensive trash in the world. Well, it turns out before the 2014 school lunch program went into effect, kids were throwing away even more fruits and vegetables, just no one was looking. So in our plate waste studies, where we looked at sort of before and after, we saw, in fact, that kids were not throwing away more fruits and vegetables. They were eating a fair bit more. They were still throwing away a lot. So there's no question we have a lot of work to do, but actually it was better than what it was before 2014. So I guess that's kind of good news, bad news. And the last thing we did, because we had over 10,000 plate waste studies, is that we, some schools that we worked in had a 15-minute school lunch program, some had a 20, some had a 25, and a few had a 30-minute school lunch. And this was just set up by the principal or the superintendent of the schools, had nothing to do with us being there, but we said, hey, we happen to have all this plate waste study. Let's see if the time, the amount of time they actually were allowed to eat lunch impacted how much they ate and what they ate. So this was in grades 4 through 8. Does anybody want to guess what happened if comparing the short versus the long school lunch program? I was just saying, I got this completely wrong. I completely assumed that the kids would sit down, eat their entree, and drink their beverage, and eventually get to their fruit and vegetable. And in fact, what happened is they really have no concept of time. For those of you who have kids, you understand what I mean. And they just started to eat their food. So they actually were eating about the same amount of the entree as they were the fruit and the vegetable and the beverage. It's just that when lunch was over, lunch was over. So the shorter the lunch period, the less they ate and the more food waste there would be. So these are published reports that you can see in the scientific literature if you like, or you can send me an email and I'll send you the report. But that's sort of the basis for what we're doing today. How can we do K through 12 better? How can we reduce waste? We have a great panel, everybody from the USDA to people who are on the ground trying new creative programs. So I would go through and introduce them all dramatically, but their bios are in the book, and I thought I'd save the time by letting them sort of introduce themselves as they talk about their program. So I think should we just go by the order in the book? There's no planned order? Okay, so first up is Alyssa Billfield, who's going to talk about her cookbook project.
Thank you. How's everyone doing? I realize it's the end of a long day at a conference.
Do you want this, or do you want to stand up?
I think I'll stand up and click through.
Oh, there's a microphone too if you want.
That's great. Can everyone hear me? Is my voice carrying through? No mics are better. So before I start, I used to live in the Boston area, but now I'm living in New Orleans. So just to gauge the room, how many folks have had the pleasure of visiting New Orleans before? Yeah, it was hot. It's getting really hot. So I'm really enjoying it. It feels like natural air conditioning here for me, although it might feel a little bit hot for you. So anyways, my name is Alyssa Billfield. I'm the co-founder and director of the Cookbook Project. And I have a really interesting background. So I came from environmental policy. I actually worked for Mass DEP at one point. And now I'm a doctoral student studying public health. So literally these two worlds are colliding for me in a very personal and professional way. And that kind of explains how the Cookbook Project came to be, because I sort of saw through my own personal life and through a lot of observations I made that it was in the kitchen where a lot of these issues sort of came to bear. And so without further ado, I'm going to start this presentation. Or it looks like the end. Yes, this is the Cookbook Project. Okay, so the Cookbook Project, actually, we have a main program that's really focused on spending more time with kids in mobile kitchens and also actual kitchens, and really teaching cooking skills. But as a lot of folks know who have worked in schools, any raise of hands, teachers, administrators, just to get a sense. It can be really hard to fit in, let's say, an hour and a half long session into an already really packed school day. So that's where the Food Waste Warriors program comes in that I'm going to talk to you about. So just to back up a little bit, New Orleans is a really unique place. A lot of folks have visited. You all know that sometimes it's referred to as an outpost of the Caribbean. So it's very different from a lot of places in the United States, which is what makes it so special. So I'm going to talk about the importance of local context. And I think you'll know from your own experience, even from school to school in New Orleans and in other places, each school kind of has its own unique environment and own culture that's really important to take into account when we're talking about programs and how exactly they're going to work. So in New Orleans, there's a really complicated charter system that replaced a lot of public schools after Hurricane Katrina. And one entity sort of came to rise after Katrina called the Healthy School Food Collaborative. And that's really been a pivotal organization to help schools figure out their school food situation, and then also to set really high standards for the food service entities that are working in New Orleans schools. So the Healthy School Food Collaborative made this really wonderful change. A lot of these schools were actually getting healthier food into the schools, but as many of us have heard the phrase, if you build it, they will come. This did not necessarily come to bear in the case of healthy school food in New Orleans. So what they found was, anecdotally, and as teachers and administrators were observing, a lot of kids just weren't eating this new healthy food that they were seeing on their plate. And there were a lot of really interesting reasons for that. So, to figure this out, the Healthy School Food Collaborative partnered with the Louisiana Public Health Institute, and they conducted a really large and very rigorous plate waste study, probably similar to a lot of Eric's plate waste studies that he's done previously. And they were able to evaluate over 20,000 school meals. It was a very, if you look at the methodology, very, very rigorous and time-consuming study. And so what they found, these are sort of three of the major findings that I think are most salient. And they were, again, coming more from a nutrition perspective, one of which was that they didn't expect only half of the recommended calories were being consumed. So that means that kids were either supplementing with other foods that they were bringing in, maybe, I think Takis are really popular, the hot Takis and soda or whatever, or they just weren't eating at all and then they weren't able to focus in school. They also found that of the food, they didn't really have tonnage stats, but they found that by ratio, 70% of the uneaten food was vegetables. So that was an interesting finding. I know maybe there are different findings in other studies. And then overall, there were a lot of issues with unfamiliarity. So New Orleans has a pretty strong local food culture, and a lot of the foods they were seeing, as you can see from these pictures, they were just really different from what they were familiar with. So for kids, that's an issue. Also for adults, if somebody puts something in front of you you've never tried before, you're going to be a little bit, cautious, right? So you can see, red beans and rice is what pretty much everyone in New Orleans cooks on Mondays, tried and true. And then, some of these new meals, they look different. So as a follow-up to that, in the third phase of this plate waste study, the Louisiana Public Health Institute implemented a multi-component intervention. And so this included not only the food education program I'm going to talk about, but also some other structural policy changes in the school environment. So I think I've heard this in a couple other sessions before, that in the schools they found that silent versus unsilent lunch had some sort of change, that having recess before or after lunch could also have a change. So they tested out some of these hypotheses in combination with the food education program, and then also teacher and staff training. So I think that other level of healthy culture in the school is really important. And for folks who have been teachers or administrators before, you know that the students are always watching you. I know that sounds kind of creepy, but they are, and they're modeling after your behavior and thinking, oh, if they're going to drink this huge coffee colada, maybe I should have this huge soda. Anyways, so we were brought in to write a really tailored curriculum for this particular intervention, and it included also an educator training piece, so it wasn't just kind of a turnkey curriculum. And it was really tailored to each school's food service menu. So we saw that was really important. Based on what foods are being served in the school, we sort of keyed up lessons that had kids on deck to taste those foods, to learn about those foods, so that then the next day when they were in the lunchroom and they saw a boxed pear, they would have some familiarity with it. So I won't go too into depth of the program, but it's basically 16 sessions and they're 15-minute long. So this is not a lot of time, but what actually ended up happening was a lot of the teachers found that the students were so engaged they would often go over, they kind of skirted into the 30-minute phase, which in the school environment is really tricky. But the gist of the curriculum is having the students make the connection. And so by this I mean giving them information about why the school meal program even exists. So framing, what are they? Why are all these meals all of a sudden appearing for them? Giving them a little bit of a history lesson about that so they kind of understand the context a bit better. One of the main components that was really important was tasting opportunities. So actually putting some of those unfamiliar foods in front of the kids so they could learn about it, taste it in kind of a supportive environment. And then we had call to actions for each session. So students were given a task for the next week. When you go to lunch, look at this or observe this, so that they actually became sort of active scientists in the lunchroom. And then finally, and most importantly, at the end, they took a pledge. So the program's, it's called Food Waste Warriors, but I would love to crowd surf for names. So they took the Food Waste Warriors pledge and, dedicated themselves to being vigilant with their school meals. And what we found, so a little bit of a buzzkill. The data from LPHI was supposed to be released on June 21st. Any folks who have worked in research before know often those deadlines get extended. So the official data is not there to be released yet, but as an organization we conducted focus groups with kids as we were going through the program, and the majority of kids that we did talk with said that they at least tried one new food and that they learned about why they should reduce their food waste. But one of the, I think, strongest results from the program is that all the teachers felt that they were really well equipped to teach the curriculum, because that can often be daunting to kind of, if you're a phys ed teacher, to foray into this sort of relatively unknown topic. So I think the training component was a really big success to this. And that is it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. So I forgot to mention that our format will be, we'll have all the speakers come up, and then at the end we'll pass around the microphone for questions so that we can come back and revisit things after everybody's had a chance to give their short mini TED Talk. While Kathleen is coming up, just to remind everybody that about 32 million children a day get some sort of subsidized school lunch in our country, so that we reach a lot of people, which is an opportunity, but also is an opportunity for waste as well as for good nutrition. I think it's about 14 million get free or reduced breakfast, and that program, those programs account for about $11.7 billion towards school lunch. So, are you set? Okay, with that, I give you Kathleen Dietrich from the Food Bus.
Thank you very much for this invitation to be here. I'm very excited, and as fancy and smart as you all are, at Food Bus we think the kids are where it's at. And the kids actually don't complicate this issue, and they don't have to worry about policy, admittedly. but it's not a mystery to them what to do with food that they don't eat, given the choice of doing something with it other than throwing it in the trash. And that's what we do at Food Bus. We go into schools and we try and take away all the barriers that a school principal, a teacher, cafeteria manager, nutrition director at the county level throws up, and we just try and remove it. And so far, in all the schools that have approached us or that we've approached, we haven't been turned away. We do have a website and a Facebook page and a Twitter account, and on the website is our toolkit. We have kind of a loose procedure and strategy we put into schools, but we always develop it in the way that the principal wants or the PTA. So we don't impose it on them. Our mission is to gather as much unused food in K-12 schools, distribute it to the hungry, and while we're doing this, create a generational shift with children regarding food justice and wasted food. And actually, it's not really even a shift for them because they don't have a mindset about it. And we're trying to create a new norm for kids in the cafeteria, that if they're not going to eat the food, then set it aside and it'll get to a hungry person. And oftentimes in the schools, even if they're a Title I school that get free and reduced lunch, they don't know that there are people that are hungry, and that it might be a classmate, it could be a neighbor, it could be the person sitting next to them. If they're not experiencing it themselves and they don't have a parent or a mentor or a caregiver that's exposing them to that part of life, then often it's just not on their radar. Well, we started in 2012 because I was sitting at lunch with my daughter and I saw how much food was thrown out, and luckily the principal at that school had done some work in hunger relief, and he wasn't afraid to let me get the food to a pantry. After doing it in one school, I realized this has got to be going on in more schools, and I just want to acknowledge Rachel Simon and Melanie Spiegel, who are here with me from Food Bus and have helped it grow. We realized that this is a systemic problem in schools across the country. So in the schools, the kids are the one that they run the program. We don't put any burden on the staff. There is an initial period of training. We go in and we talk about it with the teachers and the principals and the kids, but then the kids take it over, like through an eco club or student council associations, or sometimes one child has a special interest in this issue, or that person's parents have contributed to a pantry locally before and they want to get involved. But we basically just collect the unused, unopened food at the end of the lunch period, and the schools help design a system that'll work in their school. Either there's a basket on the end of a school table and the kids just drop the food in it. Some schools have the kids just take it right to the refrigerator that we purchase and put in the cafeteria, because 99% of what we collect is perishables. It's almost all milk, cheese, fruit, vegetables, sorry Eric, a lot of fruit and vegetables, hummus, very healthy, nutritious stuff. Occasionally some chips or cookies, but pretty rarely. Pretty rarely. And I'm on the ground. I've done research, but I'm on the ground. So we just set up Sign Up Genius systems on the school's websites, or distributed through the PTA or the principal, where it's normally a stay-at-home parent will sign up once a week to pick up the food and take it to a pantry, or we create a pop-up pantry in the school where the counselor, who is aware of who either the Title I kids are or who kids are that aren't getting enough food, just bags it, and at the end of the week the parents come and take a bag. Or we also have added it to power packs that are supplemental backpacks that go home with some kids who need it, and they are sent home with non-perishables. So in the schools we're partnering with, they're also getting perishables over the weekend. And one last model we're going to work on developing is partnering with sister schools. So school systems that are close by each other. If one school is Title I and one is more well-resourced, then we can get the extra food there. So then the food goes straight to hungry families, and the best case scenario is that it stays right in the school system, so that if there's any pushback from parents about their tax money, or they're contributing in a way that they hadn't planned on, that it's still all straight in the school system. And I think if you have a chance and you have a kid in elementary school, or a friend or a grandkid, anybody, and you go and sit in the lunchroom just once and see what's thrown out, you will be shocked even with all the work that goes into making the food good, the kids want to talk, their stomachs are little, they are so regimented throughout the day that to sit and, kind of dutifully eat their food, I don't see it happening very much. And they are very, very, very proud of the work that they do. We tape a simple chart on the refrigerators that we buy, and either a kid or a parent will record the amount in pounds that's donated every week. We've had pantries come and give award certificates to schools based on how much they've donated. We recognize the eco clubs and the student councils for their work in organizing this. Oftentimes, it's a 6th grader and an older student who's a little more responsible will go and wheel a cart through the cafeteria to collect the food. But it's pretty seamless. So we are definitely helping reduce waste and schools' hauling fees. So we for every school we're partnering with, we've bought a refrigerator because the food that comes out from the cafeteria line can't go back in, even if it's completely packaged, an unopened milk, an unopened cheese stick. It's a crazy rule, and that could be a great policy change. And we buy baskets, cards, scales if they need one to weigh it. We make really fun posters, stickers, signs, whatever either the teacher, the principal, or the PTA parent wants to make it take off at their school. We almost always have it live under the PTA because that way there's a rotation of parents going through, so we've shown that it's sustainable because once the parents' kids age out, there's a parent already in line who's either doing it or will take it over. And we've demonstrated scalability because we've gone from one pilot school to about 35 across the country. California, Washington State, Arizona, North Carolina, Virginia, Illinois. It just takes one interested person in the school, really, for us to get going. We spend a lot of time educating schools. The county systems, nutrition directors are really the key person because they can shut it down across an entire county. But even if a nutrition director says it's okay, a principal may say no. So the sort of a problem is that the decision making about whether or not it can happen is hyper local. And even with more information emerging around the Bill Emerson Good Samaritan Act and other local laws that protect people and schools specifically, there's still a lot of fear about that. We are a nonprofit and the liability would fall on us if there is any, and that really helps a lot of principals move to yes. But I think the biggest thing that we're doing that is creating a change regarding wasted food is involving children. And we're having a lot of fun. The kids are having a lot of fun. And they are very, very happy to have a choice about what to do with their food if they're not going to eat it, instead of throwing it out. And I would actually say Food Bus was spontaneously started by kids because I actually had been in a cafeteria just to help with recycling, and I think because an adult was standing there, the kids started piling up this huge amount of food. I wasn't there for the food. But somehow they were thinking, oh, they better not throw it out. There was an adult there. And from that, we founded Food Bus, and it's grown. And it sort of takes on a life of its own once it's in the school. And we stay involved. We provide funding over the years if the schools need it. We don't interfere. We ask for weights twice a year so we can calculate a total across the year. We use those totals when we're writing grants or trying to get donations. It's been so popular at one school, they created their school-wide picture as sort of a graph of how much they saved over the course of 1 year. And we say that the kids all over the country are driving the food bus when they get off the school bus. So that's Food Bus. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Fantastic success story. It is heartening that kids are the ones that are directing it.
Yep.
Speaking of kids directing it, our next speaker is also on the ground. Rhonda Mace is solid waste coordinator at Chittenden, the town of Chittenden. I think that's what it is.
No, it's Chittenden County.
Chittenden County. Okay, she's going to tell us about some things she's done to set up a food share.
All right, so I'm going to go microphoneless as well, just because I have a very loud voice and I don't really know how to use a microphone, so I don't hurt your eardrums. But so yeah, so I am the school outreach coordinator for our solid waste district in the largest county in Vermont, which probably isn't very big because like somebody was here from San Diego earlier, and I'm like, yeah, you have as many people in your city as we have in our whole entire state. But we do house 25% of the population of the entire state in our county, so our job is pretty big. You know, we are tasked as a organization. We are tasked with managing pretty much everybody's unwanted stuff. We have to do it, you know, environmentally and economically, but we also do it with efficiency and a lot of enthusiasm. And I have the coolest job, I think, anyway, because I get to hang out in the schools. All right, so. I get to go not only work with the admin and the teachers and the custodians and the kitchen staff, but I get to work with the youngsters. And as Kathleen was saying, like, that's where it's at. The kids do drive change. That's. I mean, I can go in and yap all day long. Hey, you should be doing this. I think this would be an awesome idea. But it's the little kids that come in and they're like, I think we should do this. Okay. And everybody just melts. So I use them to facilitate things. So my part on this panel is that in Vermont, we just recently, last month, actually passed or approved two pieces of two guidance documents. One, a share table, and Bryn will talk about this in depth, so I'm not going to get deep into it, but I'm going to talk about the fun stuff. So one about share tables. Where kids can put their uneaten, unopened foods onto a table, as Kathleen was saying, and she comes and takes it away. In our model, the school distributes it as they see fit. And two, donating foods, not just through institutions or K-12 schools, but higher level schools and businesses. But again, I'll leave that to her. So as you can see up there, so I do a lot of this. All started because the idea of this needing guidance from health department and agency of natural resources and all of the state government people that can get things moving is because I'm boots on the ground. I work with these kids. We do a lot of waste audits. I did 19 waste audits in the last year and a half or so at different schools. And I mean, I'm new to this job, frankly. I mean, I've only been here for almost 2 years. So when I first started doing this, I was just like, whoa, all right, this is a lot of stuff going into the trash can. And I'd go in and I'd hang out at lunchtime too, just to get an idea how cafeteria, been a long time since I've been in school. I know I look very young, but it's been a long time since I've been in school. And I was like, how do lunch, lunches work? So you go in and I'd see all this food like piling up. As something like, kids don't want to throw it away because I'm standing there, I'm an adult. It's like so totally echoing. So they pile up all this food and I'm like, what are they doing? What's going to happen to this? And then, whoever was in charge of into the trash. And I'm like, who? And in Vermont, we're very good at sorting out our food scraps as well, especially in our public schools. And so I'm just like, I'll just take that, put it in the compost. It's okay. So I started doing waste audits with different schools that were really into it. They wanted to know, like, what were we throwing away? And where can we improve our sorting techniques? Right, so this is just one waste audit that we did at a school. And as you can see, so lots of uneaten, unopened foods. Now this is just what the kids are putting into the trash can, all right? This is not the things that they're tossing into the compost when they're heading up to the sort station. So again, yeah, just the trash. So I see this, I get very sad. And the first slide, you can see me with a bag of apples that was just from last April. And I was just like, are you kidding me? Now, these aren't just kids that are probably throwing this stuff away, but they're doing it also in their classroom under the supervision of their teachers and paras and whoever's in there. So we're not doing a very good job as adults modeling. I mean, when I was a kid, my pops would have kicked my butt had I thrown anything away that was still edible. So, yeah, I mean, there was no questions asked, you know? So, so I think, not that we have to get back to that model, but if we're allowing our kids as adults, as educators, as, you know, just moms and dads or aunts and uncles to just toss uneaten, like, what are we saying to our kids? Yeah. It's useless, it's like no big deal. But it is a big deal because when they see this, like that little boy there sat there for quite some time, like just like, I can't believe this. I can't believe this. And I'm like, dude, I can't believe it either. Like, this is crazy. And all the kids that helped, now these were 5th graders on a green team. They were very invested and ready to go. So, but they were all like appalled and ashamed. And I was like, but you know what, guys, we can change this, you know? I'm like, Recycle Bond is working with the state. We're trying to get some guidance on so we can have, with faith, with some confidence, share tables or ways to use this food up. This was our results from that particular sort. The rest of that stuff you don't have to really worry about. But the wasted food, 12% by weight was wasted food of their trash. That's one day. That was about 20 pounds of uneaten, unopened food, you know, usable surplus food, if you will. So 20 pounds one day, one elementary school, 400, a little over 400 kids, so small elementary school probably in comparison to a lot of you. Kind of a larger elementary school in our books, but so you could see, like, I mean, that's a lot of uneaten food, and this is a community that can't afford to be throwing away uneaten, unopened food. They're not, they're not upper echelon school, that's for sure. They could definitely use that food some way, shape, or form, after school programs, whatever. So that's kind of, you know, spawned me like, well, what can we do with this food? So I'm like, whoa. So I would go to schools, like I said, and I'd monitor lunches, hang out, help them out. So this was the like varying array of share tables. So we got one that's labeled, all right, great. And you can see the variety of things kids would put in it. And then we got another one where they're just like, I don't really want to throw it away, so I'm just stuffing it here in the corner, and then hopes that somebody does something with it. Now, this particular school on the left-hand side, this is really what started my conversation with the state and with the different departments or agencies of the state, because this particular school, they didn't want to advertise that they had a share basket because they were told, well, one person was told it was illegal. Another person was told the food services manager was like, oh, hell no, we're not doing that. It's not, you know, the sanitarians or the health inspectors will have my, I don't even know. I'll be in trouble. Yeah, there you go. And then the principal was just like, well, I am not throwing all that food away. He's like, we live in a food insecure area, and I will be damned if that stuff's going into the trash can or the compost, I don't care. It's going to go into the stomachs of hungry people. And if I have high school, this was an elementary school, if I have high schoolers walking into an elementary school at the end of the day to get milk and to get fruit, he's like, that food's staying right where it's at. He's like, it's going nowhere. So they actually have a refrigerator at the entrance of their school in their lobby, and then all of that, even though there's like milk in it, looks like it's like questionable of the safety of that food. After every lunch, all of that food goes into the refrigerator. They now have a big share basket that says, share basket, put your food in here. And at the start of next school year, we will be rolling out a program because now we have fantastic guidelines that support the schools, and sitting down and talking about that with the health department and the Agency of Education will really help bring all these schools in together. So, that's my side of the story. After this and after discussing it and having 4 different opinions on whether share tables were allowed or not in one school with 189 students, not a big school at all, I was like, Ranja, you need to really, somebody needs to give you some answers. Like, they can't just be throwing all this food away, especially in this particular neighborhood where kids are hungry and high schoolers are coming into elementary school to get some food, and parents are stuffing their kids' backpacks at the end of the week with food to take home because they don't have enough to feed their own kids. So I was like, all right, so I called the health department and I'm like, oh, let's start there. And I'm just this low, I'm just a little kind of municipal kind of person, like, oh, help me. Can we have share tables? So, I get like about that much of an answer back, and the people are busy. So then I called Bryn, and she's a go-getter, and she's got a little bigger voice than I do. A little more pull in the system. So we ended up getting together, was it 5-ish, 4 or 5 agencies, 4 or 5 organizations, or she'll talk about that, and ended up drafting up some really great guidelines that are supported by multiple agencies in our state. So I'm very, very proud of that, and they can be found on, well, she'll talk about that too, but you can find them on our website as well. If you're interested in doing one of those fantastic audits, they are super fun. At first maybe not, but you get used to it. We also have guidelines posted on our website too, and I am available so you can call me and if you have any questions on how to conduct some sort of audit. But that's where I would suggest starting, is because you don't know what you're throwing away if you don't see what you're throwing away. And what you can do it at lunchtime all you want, but those classrooms, kids, more and more, I don't know, in Vermont, we've seen there's more and more classes eating in the classroom, like breakfast in the classroom. A lot of those fruits actually came from classroom trash. So if we're not looking at the trash and we're just looking at lunchtime, we're missing a whole slew of things. And if you're a composter or a compost at school, that's something we didn't even measure. And until this year, I'll be honest with you, until that audit in April, I wasn't even measuring wasted food or food being thrown out and eaten unopened food. That was the first time we had measured it. So, all right, if you have any questions, let me know. Thank
Great.
you.
So we're kicking this upstairs to the state now. Hopefully, Rhonda left you something to talk about, Bryn. Yeah. So this is Bryn Oakley from the Vermont Department of Environmental Conservation.
Thanks. First, I want to say if anybody is not part of the Food Recovery Challenge already, please sign up. With enthusiasm like that, I'm sure everybody will be fast to sign up for that today. But I hopefully I'm not going to be too dull being at the policy end of things, but kind of what's brought me into this. So I work in the solid waste management program for the state. We like to call it the materials management. We're moving away from calling it solid waste, similar to the EPA has for years now. But one thing that I really want people to resonate on is our mission. And I just highlighted that segment up there about conserving Vermont's natural resources. And every now and then there's an aha moment when we're working with our partners and starting new relationships, and it kind of depends on the partner what that aha moment is. And I think last fall, one of the things that Teresa Snow clicked on from Salvation Farm, she spoke earlier today, was it's natural resources. We were talking about natural resources. And I think one of my aha moments is we're talking about food, not waste. And I think once we reframe that, and you see me as somebody who's not coming in to manage your waste, your perspective and the perspective of those that I've worked with thus far, their entire approach and demeanor is much more open and welcoming. So I wanted to highlight that aha moment. And then there's always the personal aspects of you can see documentaries, you can hear anecdotes, you can read reports, but until you're really standing in front of almost 30 totes full of edible food, you really just don't necessarily get angry about it. So I'm angry about food that's going to waste, that could be eaten. And thankfully, my agency has adopted a version of the food recovery hierarchy. And I know we've seen the hierarchy ad nauseum, but we adopted it into our legislation, into our universal recycling law back in 2012. And that has enabled us to talk about not just the landfill ban and getting materials out of the landfill, and this is your expectation. You can send it to a composting facility, you can send it to an anaerobic digester, but to prioritize how we manage the food that's edible before it's discarded. And I'll get into a little bit of the nuances of why that's even more important for us in Vermont. But as a summary, our universal recycling law, similar to some other states, does have a landfill ban on food waste. We're the only state in the nation that has banned it all the way down to the household level, and that will be fully effective in 2020. And in preparation for that, we did the second statewide waste composition study, so we could assess just how much food we're seeing from the commercial side of things, that's our ICI up there, and how much is coming from the households. We are seeing about 2/3 from the household level, so there are some things we want to work on, but while we can, and while we do have support systems, networks, getting at the commercial and institutional side of things is a great way for us to start to approach that. Since those landfill bans, the timeline for that phases in with the large generators until it gets down to the household level. And we do have great symbols that are free for use, so if anybody is looking for standardized symbols, please let me know. I have business cards up here. The more consistent we are in our messaging, the better we can see the appropriate placement of the materials. We're always worried about contamination from a variety of perspectives, so that helps. So as I was quickly wanted to mention, when we're talking about system-wide solutions, so yes, my agency regulates our solid waste facilities and our composters, digesters, transfer stations, landfills. So I don't really have authority to tell people that they have to put it, that they have to donate. But when you get into the conversation, people do realize that it's food and it can be used for value-added products or for redistribution. The reality is, because we're a rural state, we do have a lot of challenges about transporting materials across up in north, south, and east and west in the state. We really, if you've been to Vermont, we've got a lot of side roads and not too many interstates. So the landfill ban is based on a 20-mile radius. So that's where the circles you see up there are. And the numbers are where our certified composting facilities are. And when this map was created, there were 12. And actually, since then, we've decreased to 11 that are permitted to take food scraps. So we see some infrastructure challenges with the implementation of this. We have one digester that's certified to take post-consumer food scraps, and one that's in a pilot. When we look at the upstream systems and the upstream infrastructure, and when everybody here has a sense of just how much food could be captured for redistribution or value-added products, there are over 225 network partners with the food bank, and many, many more. There's probably 350 if you look at all the food shelves and soup kitchens that could capture that food. And then we have, going down on the hierarchy, we do have 3 commercial chicken feeding operations that will collect the food scraps. But for highest and best use and convenience and the system's approach, we do need to look at the entire portfolio. And sometimes it's not, it isn't always appropriate for it to go to the food shelves or food bank, but to the extent that it's there, we need to utilize it. For perspective, earlier today, it was mentioned that the food insecurity rate may be 1 in 6 in the nation. Vermont has a 1 in 4 food insecurity rate. Over 13% of our 626,000 population is food insecure. And at the school level, over 40% of our students are eligible for reimbursable meals. That means we're almost seeing if we can, as a state, have universal meals. So when Rhonda says we can't afford to throw out edible food, it couldn't be more true. And that kind of leads me to, how can we pair this surplus food with the need? How can we make sure that we are removing barriers of fear of liability and fear that the food service managers are gonna get in trouble with our sanitarians? How can we get food to people without unnecessary barriers? So Rhonda reached out to me, and we had a meeting maybe last August, early September. And so it's taken about 9 months to come up with 2 documents. One is double-sided, so basically 3 pages worth of guidance. So when you say it takes a little while for reports and studies to come out, it's 3 pages of guidance. But for perspective, I naturally have some high expectations, and we're working with 3 other agencies besides my own. So we have to think about who are the people that are coming to the table? What are their needs? What are their concerns? And how can we make sure that they're all being met? So what is that getting to yes? For the Department of Health, it's food safety and handling. For Agency of Education, they want to make sure they're not getting in trouble with USDA's reimbursable meal program. And we'll get into that just in a moment here. For our Agency of Agriculture, it's their concern about local procurement and local foods. And the perception that the push to have local foods increasing in the system is that food is actually the food that's going to waste. So you have some PR nightmares there. And then the federal, there's lots going on at the federal level and new bills being adopted and reviewed by committees. For us, it's our natural resources. It's our highest and best use. It is the food recovery hierarchy. The more that we are able to prevent wasted food, and to capture that surplus and redistribute it as necessary, the less emphasis we have and less need we have for the infrastructure component. The food bank, they want to make sure that they're getting quality food. They were all, and all of these entities listed here were part of monthly phone calls, conference calls, to develop and review these documents. Our municipal entities, that's Rhonda, needing technical assistance. They just need to have faith that they are doing the appropriate thing, that they're following guidelines, checklists for the share tables, that they're following checklists for food safety and handling, time and temperature, and just kind of laying it out in a simple, plain language sense. Our farm to school coordinators have been really excellent partners, because they're already on the ground, they're already there, and they want to have the food systems thinking. They want to educate our kids, not just about farm to plate, but farm to plate to farm. What happens when that food goes uneaten? And then for the food service managers, they have so much they're dealing with, so many requirements, short timelines for everything. They just want to make sure it's legal and safe. So that's my contribution. I do have copies up here if you'd like, and they're online as well. Follow us at BT Recycles, and thank you so much for joining us.
So now we go up one more level to Julie O'Baggy, who's at the USDA at the national level, and will give us some insights from her perspective. It's late in the day, using that.
Great. So thanks everyone for sticking with us. I know it's been a long day, although it's been a very informative and productive day. So I think it's been a worthwhile investment in time. I am here to talk a little bit about the USDA perspective when it comes to food waste in the K-12 population. I wanted to begin by noting that my affiliation in the program is USDA Center for Nutrition Policy and Promotion. That is who I'm with right now, but my immediate previous position was with the USDA's Food and Nutrition Service, Northeast Regional Office, School Nutrition Programs Branch, working as the nutritionist who provided some training and technical assistance to state agencies and schools in the Northeast region, which consists of New England and New York. And one of those topic areas that was a pretty hot issue during my tenure at the Northeast Regional Office was food waste and implementation of the school meal program. So a lot of what I'm talking about today comes from my experience working in that role. And I do have some colleagues from NERO here today. So Candy Stoiber is right here. She's the division director, and Matt Chukowski is over here. He's with the nutrition branch as well, and I'm know they'd be happy to engage and answer questions later too. But first, I just wanted to talk a little bit about USDA's guidance around food waste. Three-pronged approach: reduce, recover, recycle. A lot of the concepts I think you've heard discussed throughout the day already. Reduce is where I'm hoping to spend most of my time talking today. That's the focus on producing only what's needed to serve students. So keeping really good food production records and being able to forecast how much you're preparing and how much you're serving to students so that you're not having as much waste at the end of, say, a lunch menu or a week of serving meals to students. And then encouraging students to consume what's on the tray. And I will note that I think these slides are going to be shared. So I did put some links and resources throughout so that if you have the slides afterwards, you'll have access to a lot of the resources that I mentioned today. But just last week, USDA did release an updated set of guidance, memo referenced here about the use of share tables in child nutrition programs. Not much has changed in the guidance, but it does expand the use of share tables to the CACFP program in addition to school lunch to the breakfast program. The second prong is recover. So we've had a lot of really good discussion today about the donation of unwholesome food to nonprofit institutions. And I think the real key piece here is that it has to be done in compliance with state and local laws. So USDA doesn't really have a lot of regulation or policy around this. It tends to occur more at the state and local level. So most districts are more beholden to rules and regulations at that level. But there is a USDA guidance document on this that is available, as well as a nice legal guide that provides a nice overview of the Good Samaritan Food Donation Act that has also been mentioned several times today. A definite point of confusion among many, and addresses the issues around liability with donating food, but it's a really good resource if you're interested in that. And then finally, the last prong is recycle. So producing compost on site at a school to use in, say, a school garden, or to develop some relationships with farmers or other organizations within the community that might be interested in coming and taking the food waste and using it to compost on your farm or feed your animals, that sort of thing. But as I mentioned, I want to spend most of my time today talking about the first sort of approach to reducing food waste that USDA emphasizes, and that's on reducing food waste from the beginning and getting kids to actually eat what's on their tray. I think a lot of effort went into implementing the Healthy Hunger-Free Kids Act of 2010, which has been alluded to several times, where USDA was given the authority to update the nutritional standards for meals served in schools. And so there's a lot more fruits and vegetables now required to be offered, whole grains, that sort of thing. And so as a nutritionist, and a nutritionist who works with food assistance programs, to me, the most important piece of all of this is getting kids to actually eat what is now being offered to them in the school lunch line, because it's not really nutrition until it gets consumed. So that's a really sort of critical piece, I think, when it comes to reducing food waste and improving the health and diet quality of children in the U.S. So this slide, it's not comprehensive, but it does list many of the creative strategies that we see schools using and implementing. And I think another key feature of many of these strategies that I put on the slide are the fact that they're evidence-based. And so you've also heard several mentions of evaluations and studies that have been done, and really nice evidence-based strategies that have been sort of proven and evaluated to work, and lots of references and research bases really growing around these issues. So it's nice to have that sort of evidence to support implementation of some of these strategies. So one, recess before lunch. A lot of schools have recess traditionally occur after lunch. Kids are really anxious to get out and burn off their energy, and so even short lunch periods are shortened even further when kids are anxious to get out onto the playground. And so there's been some nice research showing that if you move recess before lunch, kids are able to get out, get their physical activity, and they come in hungry and ready to eat, and they actually eat more of the food that they're taking on their tray. Longer lunch periods, we heard a little bit about that. Even going from 15 to 20 or 20 to 30 minutes can make a big difference in how much a child is able to consume off of their tray. Both of the first two, you might think of as sort of an easy fix, but when it comes to school scheduling, it's not that easy. But I think it's a really good opportunity for partnering with administration and sharing some of this evidence that can sort of help food service and administration and others in the school wellness community to think about some of these strategies and how they might be worked into the school day. Smarter lunchroom strategies are a really popular topic these days. The Cornell University Behavioral Economics Group sponsors the smarterlunchrooms.org website, which has a whole host of different strategies. Essentially, they're no-cost, low-cost strategies that help make the healthy choice the easy choice, or sort of the default choice. And so I just highlighted a few here. There are many. But one that seems to be getting a lot of attention lately is this idea of slicing up the fruit that goes on the line rather than, say, offering a whole apple or a whole orange. I think you saw Rhonda's picture of the waste audit. There was a lot of whole fruit there. And I think of elementary school kids peeling an orange or eating an apple if you're maybe missing a few teeth is not an easy task. And so just simply cutting up some of that fruit and putting it on the line can really help kids actually eat more of it in that short amount of time they have for lunch. Also some really great creative marketing ideas that seem to really work with elementary school kids in particular, but there's some great work going on in middle schools and high schools to get some excitement behind things like superhero spinach, x-ray carrots, that sort of thing, to do some creative marketing. If you're not familiar with Dale Hayes, she is a really great proponent of the school meals program. She has a Twitter handle and a Facebook page, School Meals Rock. And she highlights some of the most creative school marketing that I've seen. And so it's a great follow because she has just some fabulous school districts around the country featured for some of the marketing that they do around their meal programs. The offer versus serve service model is another one that we would recommend people think about and take advantage of. The school meals program has 5 main components that students need to be offered. But if you follow the offer versus serve model, it's a little bit complicated, but in a nutshell, you have to offer the 5 components, but students are only required to take 3. One of those 3 must be a fruit and vegetable, but milk is not a requirement. And so that's another sort of point of confusion, I think. And so using this model, I think, allows kids to have a little bit more autonomy and a little bit more independence and flexibility in choosing what items they think they want off the lunch line. The school cafeteria can still meet the reimbursable meal requirements, but it can result in less waste. So if a kid comes through the line and doesn't feel like drinking milk that day, they're not required to take the milk and the school still meets the requirements. So certainly a model that schools can consider adopting. Chefs Move to Schools is another really fun initiative that you've heard mentioned today. Not only getting chefs in working with the kids and doing food demos and hands-on cooking education with the kids, but also getting chefs in and doing training with the school food service staff is a really critical piece to this. And so Michelle Obama's Let's Move campaign has really done a lot of work highlighting the Chefs Move to School program. You can go on Chefs Move to School website, put in your zip code, and find chefs who have indicated that they're interested in participating or partnering with a school. So if you're interested in seeing if there's one in your area or near your district, you could just stick your zip code in and the chefs will pop right up. And then finally, the Farm to School program, and that's what I wanted to spend just a little bit more time talking about today, because I think it's been a really exciting sort of win-win-win program that also came out of the Healthy Hunger-Free Kids Act of 2010, created the Farm to School division within USDA, and they've done a really nice job of sort of tracking data from when they were created and surveying schools across the country to get more information about their participation, things that have been successful, some of the benefits that they're seeing, some of the products that they're bringing into schools. And the 2015 Farm to School census data was recently released, and there's a whole host of benefits to participating in farm to school programs, but many of them tie in, I think, directly to the reduction of food waste. So willingness to try new foods, increased fruit and vegetable intake when kids know that they're eating foods that come from a local farm or from their school garden, or just something that they're familiar with in their community. They're just much more likely to try those foods and eat those foods. And several schools reported direct reductions in food waste when they implemented a farm to school program or in days where they were serving local foods in the cafeteria. So you can see a whole host of benefits, but a lot of them, I think, directly tie into getting kids to actually eat the healthy foods that are on the tray and reduce food waste, ultimately. And one really great success story that comes from New England, I think we're lucky here in New England. There's some really, really great farm to school programs that have been going on. For example, the state of Rhode Island was #1 with the highest participation rate, number of districts participating in farm to school programs. Vermont, again, also a really sort of fabulous model farm to school programs across the state. This slide comes from Milton, Vermont. I think there may be somebody here from
She wants to.
from Milton, but it's a small town up near Burlington. They were one of our FY 2014 Farm to School grantees. And using that money, they worked with the town officials, people with the school wellness committee, the food service director, and they were able to hire on a farm to school coordinator. And that person came in and did a lot of work in terms of setting up relationships with local farms, getting local foods into the school system, developing curriculum, education, outreach to parents. And I think the picture kind of shows the success of it all. They were able to bring in really great local foods, get the kids really engaged with the foods that were being brought in, eating some of these new and different things that you might not think about when you think about school lunch. And so, I think it's a really good success story about what a farm to school program can accomplish in terms of not only getting the kids to eat what's on the tray, reducing food waste, engaging kids, engaging the community, helping the local farm economy. So kind of a win-win-win across the board. And then the last two slides, I just put together some resources again for reference. The USDA FNS Child Nutrition Programs website has a lot of those guidance materials. The Office of Community Food Systems is where Farm to School is found. They have tons of great resources and information about getting farm to school programs started. FNS actually has a YouTube channel. So if you go to the FNS YouTube channel, you'll find various playlists, and one of them actually is all about food waste reduction. And so there's like maybe 10 or 15 existing trainings that are on that website, videos, webinars. Several feature the food bus, for example. And so if you're looking for more training materials or have colleagues or school food professionals that you're working with, you can send them there. And there's some really nice existing trainings. The Smarter Lunchrooms I mentioned is a great resource. USDA My Plate has a really nice infographic. It's more consumer-based, but a lot of it does also apply to K-12 population, but it's Let's Talk Trash, one-page infographic. And then FNS also has a really nice one-page infographic that's like a one-page handout summary with some interesting statistics about food waste, but also a lot of really great ideas, some of which I've mentioned today about how to reduce food waste in the K-12 setting. And my email is here. Feel free to reach out with questions or anything. So that's it from me.
Great, thank you, Julie. I think we learned a lot today from the ground all the way up to the policy. I think it is intriguing. I agree with almost everything you said, but not everything. So I'll be controversial, just like Doug was controversial this morning. I think the biggest issue when you're dealing with kids is they have to like it. They have to like the food they're eating. So some of the Smarter Lunchroom things that Brian Wansink came up with, I think were really great and creative, and naming foods was really great, and it worked on kids for a little bit. And some of our longer-term evidence-based trials what you found is you could trick a kid for a month or two, but after a while, if the food doesn't taste good, they're going to throw it away, even if it says X-ray carrots on it. So, but I think that, the creative things are to take an apple and cut it up. Gee, who would have thought of it? I think that's fantastic, because all of the slides we see where they're talking about food waste, there's always the picture of the big bag of apples. So, sometimes that can be bad, because if a kid takes an apple and only eats one slice, you can't repurpose that apple, obviously, because then it's cut up. So there's, I guess, I haven't seen the evidence on what happens with that, but I'm sure that if you think about third graders, are really going to be able to peel the orange and then their hands are sticky for the rest of the day. So I can clearly see the the 2-second thought process that probably goes through their mind of, I don't want that, I'm going to take it, looks good, but there's no way I have time to peel it. So, I think creative strategies like that, and some of it I think is connecting. We heard some stories about how do you connect with the superintendent, the principal, the food service director, and this local school manager to really sort of break into that to help them, because they're all too busy and they're all worried about the bottom line. Unless they have a chef training or have some other creativity, usually food service directors are not thinking necessarily about what can I do to be more creative with what's being served. So I'll just start out, I don't know, you all told great stories. I think if you can give us insights into, how does the food bus connect to engage people? How do you said, I think you were in 35 different schools in 12 different states. So I know it's the parent or a kid. Is that usually the connection, or how do you get people excited about this other than saying food waste is bad, we have to repurpose it and give it to people who are hungry?
So a lot of people are just finding us on the internet when they go to look what can be done with school food that is not getting eaten. Food bus is what comes up. More and more other things are, but for a long time it was just us. But let me just say something. Apples drive me crazy. I
saw you shaking your head. She was like going like this.
Don't slice the apples, because then you can't donate them. Because then people get worried about contamination. And what is so ridiculous about that is that many of the people that are getting this food are dumpster diving for their food. So all the concern about contamination, I get it. I've worked in healthcare, but the alternative for some of these people is that they're going to trash cans. I've had principals tell me stories of parents they've seen take meat out of a trash can at a Safeway and then grill it there outside the store. This is at Sleepy Hollow Elementary School in Fairfax, Virginia. Some counties will let you take a whole apple, and then right across the border, a foot away, they won't let you donate the apple whole or sliced. But definitely sliced apples are a no-no. And then they get please.
Is the purpose of school lunch to create a food donation or to feed kids? So this is sort of like, it's a perfect example.
Well, but it goes,
issue.
True, but really it just goes so far and so deep in our society, and you'd have to start talking about the farm bill and the dairy lobby and cutting back on the amounts of milks and cheese. It is to feed the kids, but in the meantime, there's a lot that's not getting eaten. And so if you want to take a moral high ground and say this is just about feeding kids, we're not really trying to create excess food to donate. When we go to talk to kids in cafeterias, we spend a lot of time telling them they need to eat their food. This is not a guilt-free dumping ground, but there's still a lot of food, and to turn your back and not do something with that food, that's on the wrong side of the tracks as far as I'm concerned.
Right.
There's so much food.
Yeah, the question is, I think we would need, I don't know if you know of anything, Julie, is there a good study where they slice the apples and oranges and that decreased the apple and orange waste by 50%? You're right, we can't repurpose the 50% that was thrown away, but the 50% that was consumed is doing tremendous benefit for the kids, a quarter of which are food insecure in Vermont.
Allow kids to bring knives to school so they can.
All right, get this guy out of here. Yes.
Well, maybe you could offer them sliced, as an offering. So
Sliced or whole, yeah, one.
Eat the sliced and the other ones.
I mean, there's a labor effect of having to do that. Yes.
So I do know of one school that does that model. They had, it's a school that was able to have a parent come in and just station themselves at the end of the line with an apple slicer. And as the kids came through, they say, "Would you like it sliced?" And they just, but they were lucky enough to have the resources to have parents come and do that.
So the question is, how many of those sliced apples were still in the trash? So if they ate them, it worked. If half of them asked not for to be sliced, and those are the ones that were in the trash. So we're supposed to stop now, but I'm going to take one or two more questions because we started 1 or 2 minutes late. Yes. You may have to be loud. Go ahead.
I'm a parent from Andover, Massachusetts, and I started a food rescue program at schools. We have supposedly in the fall, starting the 7 schools in Andover and the 7 schools in North Andover. I haven't, it took me 3 years just to get all the local authorities on board. But I still get a lot of resistance about sharing tables and the backpacking program because they say cross-contamination, about allergies. How can you put it in the middle of the table at school? What about a kid with allergies touch it and someone who ate peanut butter touched it before? So they say no for sharing tables, so we only donate all the stuff. But what about how you handle the backpacking program? I don't know if you said that.
Anybody have, yeah, a few of you mentioned that food gets stuck in backpacks.
It's a private list of who is in reduced lunch, so no one is allowed to know who.
But the school counselor knows, and they have the list of who has allergies, and that hasn't come up. But the school counselor knows, and if there's an allergy.
Yeah, who packs, because they told us.
Oh, the school counselor.
Schools cannot get it on board because it's not their job description. They cannot.
School nurse.
So there's no federal policy that covers all this, and that's really an issue with the hyperlocal decision making. But in the counties that we've gone in that do add perishables to the backpacks, no one's actually said that to me. But I get a lot of that this is illegal, that's illegal, this is
Yeah, no one was.
But they can definitely add that to the backpacks.
And in the school I work in, the parents come in and put it in the backpacks. Like
I'm
it's
there
not
every day, believe me.
Yeah, so the parents are coming in, so I'm like.
So after school's over, the parents are taking the food from the share table and putting it in the
Yeah, so by
backpacks.
the end of Friday, there's nothing left.
So there's not a stigma when the other kids, anybody can take it? It's not, someone walks up with a backpack, obviously people go, oh, that's someone who must be on free or reduced
Yeah,
lunch.
that's okay.
There's no stigma with that? There's no concerns?
There's not. I mean, they're not at this particular school,
Yeah.
and I don't know if it's because they're probably.
A lot of them are in the same
I would
boat.
say they're pretty high.
Yeah.
I'd say pushing 50, if not more,
Yeah.
percent. And I mean, at one school, I mean, there's a share basket there, and by the end of lunch, there's nothing left in there.
So
But
kids
we're
on the way out
talking-
who are still hungry, grab an apple.
Yeah, and that school's like nearly 60% free and reduced lunch.
Question way in the back.
I have a comment. I have 2 kids in school, and I think one of the most important things is just to allow more time, because by the time they're online and then they get to their tables, they literally have maybe 5 or 10 minutes to eat. I don't know if any of you saw Michael Moore's Where to Invade Next, but they featured a French school and they actually get served. They have an hour. Now, I'm not expecting that to happen in the schools, but I think there's a lot of different tweaks that can be done to enable kids to have more time to eat and to be able to digest the food. In the school I'm working with, one of the teachers is interested in maybe having the kids come and sit down, and instead of waiting on the line to get into the lunchroom cafeteria, have rearranging the tables so they're in circles instead of these long lines. It's not quite as overwhelming, and then being served vegetables first in little paper boats. And then so while they're waiting to get online, they can be eating vegetables, and they're always hungry when they come in, so that's a way to get them to eat their vegetables first. But in Japan, the kids actually eat in the classroom. So, but I mean, the whole.
Yeah, there's a number of different programs that have sort of been proposed like that. Obviously, extending the time of the lunch usually requires an okay from the teachers union, because then they have to stay that extra 10 or 15 minutes, extends the day. So it's more than just having a principal or superintendent. It kind of has to be something that's agreed on by everybody. But I think that seeing creative ideas like that would be worthwhile. I don't think we're ever going to be French or Japanese here. We're in too far to be able to come back and say, okay, let's just do an hour now. But obviously there are school settings where they have that. There are private schools where it works quite well. You have a 45-minute lunch. So I don't know, does anybody else want to comment on the length of the lunch period?
Short.
Short, yeah.
I think we should re-engineer that entire system. It just doesn't work. I mean, the little tweaks are not going to do it, and it's just more daydreaming. But we really should re-engineer it and maybe make 2 distinct eating times, and so that they eat at 11 and 2 for 20 minutes each time, or something like that. But sort of the over-regimentation in the school systems, especially at lunchtime, it just doesn't work.
Yeah, go ahead. I should not let him speak.
There's a lot of innovative stuff around increasing kids eating to reduce. And I just think it's an important message for all of us thinking about food waste is that Congress right now is like really eager to cut school lunch funding because of the food waste issue. It's like a softball that like hit out of the park. So in terms of our messaging, we don't want to really be bragging about how much money food's being wasted.
Yes.
But we also want to take, recognize the incredible value of diverting the food that is. So it's just, I think it's a really important messaging issue for the waste and the food recovery and the food access and school food folks to deal with together.
Can I add something to that, which is two things. Operationally, there's some logistics to be managed, how many lunch periods you can have. But if you are going out and looking to advocate in your school for a longer lunch period and you ask how long is the lunch period, make sure you're asking how much time the kids actually have to eat, because a lot of times they'll tell you it's a 30-minute lunch period, but what that really means is that 15 minutes is for recess. And so by the time the kids actually get in and out of the line, they literally, like, the bell is ringing for them to go out to recess, and like a first grader has just gotten their tray of food. And so it goes immediately from the line to the trash can and they go to recess. So when you're asking about how long you have for lunch, make sure it's purely for the consumption part of lunch and not being split between lunch period and recess.
Yeah, that's...
and not to mention standing in line waiting for food.
Yeah,
So
that's, I think, I know in some high schools they have kid volunteers who kind of, while kids are waiting in line, they kind of bring tasters to them so they can kind of sample what their choices might be that day, so they can actually say, oh, that actually was a pretty healthy vegetable lasagna. I saw that tasted pretty good. So there's lots of creative solutions. I actually worked with her husband on this project where we were timing people as they left waited in line, and there is huge variability. Even in a lunch period, that's 30 minutes. There's huge variability. That last kid in line has 13 minutes to eat the entree, the fruit, and the grain. So I think in some cases, I guess it takes a lot of people to be involved. It takes the interest of the principal, the food service director, but I think the more we educate people about food, as opposed to just something we're trying to get in a child and out, and more sort of about the deliciousness of it, I think that the better we'll be in sort of relating to how the child is satisfied by eating healthy food as opposed to just being thrown something and taking back. So join me in thanking the group here for a great discussion.
Can I add in an interesting example from New Orleans? So in terms of thinking about a revolutionary change in school systems, New Orleans post-Katrina did have a situation where they were sort of starting from a blank slate, and as such, a lot of folks in education have been looking at New Orleans as an example, because right now you have a situation where there's, I think, maybe 5 schools that are under the city and the rest are charter managements, and so it's creating a situation where there's actually a certain level of healthy competition amongst the charters to actually offer new and different and enticing services, so parents will enroll their students in the charter. So something interesting to look at coming from New Orleans, if you're curious.
Great.
Just a quick announcement, the reception has begun. To get there, you go into the courtyard, down the outside stairs, and turn right.
Wow.
Okay.